Now, so far, we've discussed really only one of two types of security considerations. We've been discussing application security so far. We discussed, how the initial connection passes a Windows username and password. We map that to a trust, etc. Anyway, that's what we described in the last couple of videos, and we're going to continue discussing that, but now in more detail. After we discuss that, we're going to move on to the issue of user/tag security. So, assuming that we've done this properly and we've mapped the incoming connection to a Pi user, the issue then becomes, okay, what does that Pi user able to do? What permissions does he have? And that really depends on how you've configured the objects in Pi, the Pi tags, etc. So those are the two types of security considerations we're going to discuss now. The application pool identity is what we use, or what is used to specify the Windows user that's associated with the SharePoint process. So in this case, the application pool we're talking about is the SharePoint application pool. You get to specify what its identity is, and it can be specified two different ways. It's more common, I think, to specify it as configurable, in which you actually specify a Windows user to be associated with that application pool, or it can be predefined. Now, we'll find this in the Iis Manager. So let me show you an example. I'll go into Administrative Tools, Iis Manager. This is the Manager application for the web servers. As you can see, there are different websites on this particular web server, and there are also different application pools. The application pools, again, those pools are to help keep the applications from using the same resources. So if one application fails, it doesn't affect the others. As you can see, there is a SharePoint application pool that's been created when you installed SharePoint. And if I look at its properties, one of the things I can see is its identity. Now, as I mentioned, there are two ways of specifying this. You can specify configurable, in which case you specify a domain user and specify the username and the password. Predefined means simply it's going to be associated with network service. Now, this has implications when it comes to the trust you're going to create. If you specify configurable and specify a username that's associated with that application pool, then you have to make sure that there is a trust that exists for that Windows username that gives that Windows user read access to the module database, basically to the Pi server. Now, if you select predefined, instead of building a trust that's going to give you access to, or it's going to give access to this particular user, you're going to build a trust that gives access to the computer on which RtWebParts is installed. And that's going to be that we're going to create a trust based on username or IP address, and that user or that trust needs to be set so that the that computer is granted read access to the module database. Now, again, this is specified in the administrator's guide that you'll find for RtWebParts. It's in the pre-installation checklist. But I do want to warn you, this is where you'll find it described in detail. I want to warn you, for the 2.1 and 2.2 versions, there was some old information that's no longer accurate. And so if you see here, this is how we show you how you find the application pool identity. Yeah, here it says map the Pi trust to the Pi admin Pi user. Well, you may be familiar with Pi admin. That would give you read-write access. That's overkill. You do not need read-write access. You only need read access. So you might want to mark that, change that to Pi demo Pi user. Same for if you're using configurable. If there's a domain user account for the application pool, we create a trust mapping that to Pi demo, and that gives that user, that Windows user, the read access required. Now, while we're in this manual, I do want to point out there's a couple of other places where this is stated incorrectly. Let me go down to page 18. Yeah, you'll see here in the after installation steps, we remind you that it says including the application pool identity needs write access. Again, that is incorrect. When you see it in both places here, including the application pool identity, that's bad, out-of-date information. I'm sorry about that. If we go back to page 5, in the very beginning, before the installation, we state the same thing. So it says the application pool identity needs write access. That's incorrect. So basically everywhere you see in the manual it says you need to give write access. That's some old information, and you in fact only need read access for the user that is associated with the application pool identity. Now again, if this was confusing, in just a couple of videos we will take a look at the actual trusts that you would create, given whether you are using predefined or configurable for the application pool identity.